All right, everyone, welcome back to another edition of Hot Topics. If you guys will, please, once again, buckle up because we get ready to have a good one tonight. This story here it generated almost a month ago, a little over a month ago. If you guys go back to when Black Lives Matter was having a lot of flack in reference to Black Lives Matter being violent, they're being very vigil with doing corrupt things. Black Lives Matter was not for doing the good deeds for the community. They were about trouble. They were about causing havoc, chaos in the city. Well, I'm telling you something. When we put this up right here, y'all give me one Black Lives thing. That right there. When we put that up, FBI, FBI, and that gentleman right there in the middle. We're going to talk about that right there. We're going to talk about what did the FBI have to do with Black Lives Matter back in 2020. Well, the story, it started out with, actually, this happens out in Denver. Was it Denver? Yes, out in Denver. When they had the riots, everything was going on. There was a lot of chaos going on out there. Well, luckily we do have some senators who are there doing a job and doing their job to make sure that the truth of any type of wrongdoing does come out and gets handled. Well, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Now, this is per The Guardian. This was February the 14th of this year. And what I'm going to do, instead of, a lot of times people, they tell you things, but they don't tell you where they get their source for it from. And you don't know whether or not they are actually giving you the source, for what it actually said or things they're making up themselves. So what I'm going to do, we're going to read this together, ladies and gentlemen. That's why a lot of times we put on the screen, we says investigate. That's what we're here to do. We're here to investigate lies. Now, this right here, article from The Guardian, and it says the FBI's use of an informant to infiltrate Black Lives Matter in Denver during the wave of the protest over the 2020 police killing of George Floyd has prompted concerns in Congress that the federal agency is again abusing its power to harass and intimidate minority groups. Go back and look at this right here portion again. It says that the federal agency, FBI, the federal agency, once again, abusing its powers to harass and intimidate minority groups. Once again, keyword right here. That right there in yellow, ladies and gentlemen. Once again. When did this happen before? Since it's once again, here's a hint. That's when it happened before. And not just that one time right there that you see on the screen, but that's when it happened before, during the Black Panther Party movement. Once again. Okay, let's go back. Pull that. Let's do this right here, y'all. Take them off the screen, yeah. All right. Now, it says, we're going to scroll down some. It says Ron Wyden, the Democratic senator from Oregon, is calling for the FBI to explain how it came to recruit a violent felon. Recruit a violent felon, a violent felon, a violent felon as an informant who then went on to gain prominence among Denver's racial justice activists. The informant is alleged to have encouraged protesters to engage in increasingly violent demonstrations while trying to entrap them in criminal misdeeds. People, not all police officers and law enforcement is corrupt, but we do know that they are there. We do know they are there. I'm going to say this one more time. Ron Wyden, the Democratic senator from Oregon, is calling for the FBI to explain how It came to recruit a violent felon as an informant who then went on to gain prominence among Denver racial justice activists. The informant is alleged to have encouraged protesters to engage in increasingly violent demonstrations while trying to entrap them in criminal misdeeds. So, what they're saying is the FBI said, hey guys, let's make this good thing that these guys, this minority group is doing, let's make it corrupt. Is there some people out there that go into good things, have good intentions, but yet and still it don't take much to persuade them to do wrongdoings? Yes, that's in any group. We just saw that, 2 years ago. Now, going down here, scroll just a little bit more. Once again, this is from theguardian.com. Just so you guys won't think that I made this up. If the allegations are true, the FBI's use of an informant to spy on First Amendment protected activity and stroke violence at peaceful protests is an outrageous abuse of law enforcement resources and authority, Wyden told The Guardian. Okay, so what happens next? What happens next? It says, if the allegations are true, this is going to be hard to determine. I truly do not have any faith in our government, in the Senate, most definitely, that they're really truly going to do anything to the FBI in reference to what they've done. But I'm glad they did bring this to the main front to show people. I'm not stating that all protests are, for anyone, are done without some type of corruption. But this right here shows corruption being placed inside of something that was meant for the better of the good, to try to destroy it, just as they did, once again, here, try to destroy it. And see, not only did they go there and they shoot and they bomb this building, they did this too. Not for sure if y'all know who that is laying there, but look at the smiles on these gentlemen's face. That's Fred Hampton of the Black Party movement. They carrying him out as he was killed. Yes. Luckily with the Black Lives Matter, there was no one killed there. And once again, this was behind the killing of George Floyd. I'm going to go a little further. Read with me in yellow, ladies and gentlemen. Wyden sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee, which has oversight over federal intelligence gathering agencies, including the FBI. He also fought for public disclosure of Donald Trump's deployment in 2020 of more than 750 police officers. Well, it didn't say police officers, 750 officers to his hometown of Portland, Oregon, based on what he called politicized and false intelligence reports. The FBI's infiltration of the Black Lives Matter in Denver appears to show another instance of the Trump administration's trampling on the rights of Americans in order to divide our country and gain political advantage, Wyden said. The FBI owes the public a full accounting of its actions, including how anyone responsible for attempting to entrap and discredit racial justice activists will be held accountable. I'm bringing this to the forefront, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can collectively as a people put pressure on the Senate, to put pressure on the FBI to report back on this and not brush it under the rug. Once again, I'm saying this, I'm showing this, I'm bringing this to the light, along with other platforms bringing it to the light as well, so that we collectively can make sure the FBI does not get away with this, because they've done it before. Why do I say they've done it before? Go back up here. When I read in yellow, it says, let's go right here. It says, concern in Congress is that the federal agency is once again abusing its powers to harass and intimidate minority groups. Concerns in Congress that the federal agency is once again abusing its powers to harass and intimidate minority groups. Why did I repeat that so many times? because some people fail to listen. They hear only what they want to hear. By me repeating it, there's no way in hell you can hear only what you wanted to hear, especially when I have it highlighted in yellow and I repeated it several times. There's some video clippings that we also have. Let me see if there's anything else in here I want to cover. I think this right here is just going down. Actually, yes, it is. The actions of the let's go right here. And I want to tilt the hat off to the Alphabet Boys for doing a documentary on this. They were the ones who really stroked this up and really gave it the light that it needed to make sure that the FBI is being put on notice for what they're doing. Read along with me, ladies and gentlemen. Let's scroll this up some. The actions of the FBI informant Michael Windecker, or Mickey, as he was known, are revealed in the 10 series podcast by the investigative journalist Trevor Aaronson. Drawing on hours of undercover FBI recordings, along with internal FBI reports and interviews Aronson conducted with the genuine racial justice protest leaders, Alphabet Boys, pieces together how Windecker unveiled himself into Black Lives Matter from May 2020. It also says right here, Windecker, who the FBI paid to spy on the activists. Now, check this out. It says right here, before I go anymore, it says Windecker, who the FBI paid. Windecker, who the FBI paid. That's confirmed. That's confirmation. But as we go up, see, this is why I say they cannot and should not be allowed to blow this under the rug. It says, if the allegations are true, wait a minute. Down here in the report, the Guardian says Windecker, who the FBI paid. It didn't say alleged paid, it said paid. Now, people can say, well, LB, that's the Guardian's thing. That don't mean it actually happened. Where did they get the information from then? I digress. We're going to move forward. Windecker, who the FBI paid $20,000 to spy on the activists, stood out from the crowd. Wow. He was white, while most protesters in Denver were African American and dressed in military fatigues. He drove in, oh Lord, a silver hearse with a boot filled with AR-15 style semi-automatic rifles and other firearms. Who in the world drives around in a silver hearse with a whole bunch of AR-15s and other firearms? Who does that? Now they say that in Denver, the protesters in Denver were most of the protesters in Denver were African American. Well, I'm gonna tell you guys something. That's what they say. A lot of pictures, when I was going online looking for pictures for that area, connecting it, a lot of the pictures didn't look like us. Not saying that, hey, I'm not saying that the Guardian is misleading when they say that most of the protesters were Black or African American. But most of the pictures I found of the protesters, most of the ones that are up there, or a lot of them don't look like us. I'm just going to put it that way. When I say us, they don't look like this guy right here. Now, it says, despite his, let's do this right here so you guys can roll with me. I'm going to roll it up a little bit. It says, despite his Garland profile, Windecker managed to convince activists that he was committed to the struggle for racial justice and could help them cope with validity on the streets. He bragged about having served with the French Foreign Legion and the Kurdish boy. See, people, this is one reason here as to why. I mean, history keep repeating itself over and over. And when we are organizing groups for the better of the good, we have to vet people no matter what they look like and where they come from and how sweet they sound. We have to diligently go in and vet them as strong as you can, get as much information off of them before allowing them to infiltrate what you create. How dare you come in here? People, come on, come on. Now I'm gonna get off of this. I have several videos that I'm going to share with you guys. And we're going to start out with Democracy Now! And with the Democracy Now!, the Alphabet Boys. Aaronson, he's going to tell a little bit of information in reference to what he found, how he came about to uncover this story of what the FBI done or allegedly done. And it's, come on, man. It's either they gave him the money or they didn't give him the money. Why print he was given $20,000 if it's alleged that he's an informant of the FBI? Come on. I mean, it's printed. You can't take it back. It's printed. But y'all sit back, and I want you guys to listen along with me some of the things that she came up with the Alphabet Boys. Here we go.
Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Evidence has emerged that the FBI played a direct role in infiltrating racial justice protests after the police killing of George Floyd in 2020. A new podcast out today called Alphabet Boys documents how the FBI paid an informant at least $20,000 to infiltrate and spy on activist groups in Denver, Colorado. The informant also encouraged activists to purchase guns and commit violence. This is the trailer to Alphabet Boys.
Now, they said this right here is the gentleman that they're stating that he was the informant. And as you listen to the next clip, I want you guys to really, whatever's going on at home, please make the home quiet so you can listen to what's said in this next clip here. Here we go.
The summer of 2020.
I know, I'm gonna go get my gas mask.
Millions protested for racial justice across the country, with some of these protests turning violent.
Over the heads of the shield!
That summer, it felt like history in the making. Big changes were coming. And then, the protests just stopped. There were these rumors that government agents had infiltrated the movement, pushing it toward collapse. It sounded paranoid, right? But you know what?
Okay, it is August 28th, 2020 at approximately 4:02 p.m.
It wasn't. I'm Trevor Aaronson, and I'm a journalist covering federal law enforcement, the alphabet agencies.
As the FBI, sometimes you gotta grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
This is Alphabet Boys, a new series from Western Sound and iHeart Podcasts. Each season, we'll take you deep inside an undercover investigation. In season 1, we're headed to Denver.
UC 7775 in Denver, Colorado. Today is August 25th.
Where FBI agents are investigating political activists following the murder of George Floyd. A mysterious man rolls into town. He's wearing military fatigues, and he has a cigar dangling from his lips. The car he drives is unmistakable, a silver hearse.
He was very convincing, but he did explain, he was for this BLM movement, and inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
Was this the guy the movement needed to take things to the next level?
At the end of the day, you come to me, I got something for you. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Or did he have a secret agenda?
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, the meeting spot, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
he's a bad guy, and bad guys attract bad guys. And I feel like he's gonna keep doing this forever.
They want to cover up the fact that local, state, and federal law enforcement caused violence here.
Did you hear what he just said? Local, state, and federal caused violence there. He said caused. Local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and federal law enforcement caused trouble there. On to the next one.
Centers on an FBI informant named Mickey Windecker, a convicted felon who once fought, he said, with the Kurdish Peshmerga. This clip from Alphabet Boys begins with a Denver racial justice activist named Zebediah Hall, who will be joining us, talking about Mickey Windecker.
I didn't know much about him, but he drove a hearse. And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns, you know, like AR-15s and all other kind of. I never held one of those before in my life, and I held it, and I was like, oh, man, I'm pro-gun and everything, but I never held anything like that. Yeah, it was just this badass dude, you know, talking about he worked in the foreign military. He was for the Black Lives Matter movement, and, you know, it just seemed interesting, you know.
In August 2020, with millions of Americans protesting across the country, activist Zeb Hall invites a guy he's met at one of the demonstrations to his apartment in Denver to talk about plans for the future.
The way I look at it is like, it has to happen, it has to happen. But it's like you said, I mean, how extreme do you expect it? Would you want it to go?
Now, this guy here, the Zeb Hall, he was one of the first ones that Windecker, you know, it came encounter with, and you know, got actually involved with Black Lives Matter. He was the one who opened the door for Windecker to come in and, you know, infiltrate Black Lives Matter. And that's why I say, ladies and gentlemen, when you have a movement and the movement is for the better of the good, you really, really have to pay attention to what happened yesteryear. Meaning, remember what happened back in the 60s and before then, as to how other people came in and infiltrated. And a lot of them even look like me. No matter what they look like, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you do your due diligence and get that word out correctly, and do correctly. Make sure you vet these people. Make sure you do everything you possibly can to check this person out to make sure that they are on the up and up to be legitimately there to help out the movement, whatever the movement is. Otherwise, more things like this is going to happen. When you do your homework, there's no way possible the FBI or anybody who has a corrupt mentality, a corrupt thought, a corrupt agenda to come in and break down something so positive, so good. Now, Amy, she's going to actually, we're going to see next in the next clip, Aaronson, and he's going to talk with Amy as to, you know, how and why the FBI did what they did. Y'all check it out.
Informant Mickey Windecker played a key role in organizing the protests in Denver. He would also go on to give the activist Zebediah Hall $1,500 to buy a gun for him, which led to Zeb Hall being arrested for transferring a firearm to a felon.
Now, see, that's the problem I have right there. Zeb Hall, he never even had a gun, never owned a gun. But Windecker, you know, already had guns, but he convinced Zeb Hall to buy one for him. And he already had them. So that was a setup right there. That's part of, all right, I'm going to get you to buy me gun illegally. It's not for you, it's for me. Remember, Zeb Hall didn't have any guns. See, That's why I say more than one person has to check people out. And when things are going on, you have to have other people that can make shot calls, or everybody collectively has to make that shot call, not just one person. In any type of organization you build up, one person should not be the only person who can make a shot call or the sole person to make a shot call. Here we go.
Some of the FBI's actions have been compared to the agency's covert COINTELPRO program, that's counterintelligence program, which targeted civil rights groups and other activist movements in the 1960s and 70s. In a moment, Zebedias Hall will join us from Denver. We'll also be joined by former FBI agent Mike German, who now works at the Brennan Center. But first, let's turn to Trevor Aaronson, who created the Alphabet Boys podcast. Trevor's an award-winning investigative journalist, contributing writer for The Intercept. He's author of the book, The Terror Factory, Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism. I mean, this is an astounding podcast series, Trevor. You've got the undercover recordings of, for example, the black activist Zeb speaking to this man, Mickey Windecker, who would travel around in a silver hearse. First, if you can tell us where he...
And that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. This clown was riding around in a silver hearse. That right there is clown move 2020. Why come BLM the radio didn't go and say, what's up with this fool? Who rides around in a silver hearse? Who does that?
You got these recordings if you can, but lay out the story for us.
Sure, I can't talk about sourcing for the recordings or the records, but what I can say is that what's significant about this show is that it's the first behind-the-scenes look at how the FBI infiltrated and investigated racial justice groups and the racial justice movement during the summer of 2020, which for 2 years now has always been an open question, which is how did the FBI respond to the racial justice movement, given the context that the FBI had previously designated black political activists as so-called black identity extremists or anti-government extremists. And what's significant about this is that the FBI in Denver, according to internal FBI recordings or internal FBI reports and undercover recordings, hired a convicted felon with a history of sexual assault and menacing with a weapon to infiltrate these groups while being paid thousands.
Did y'all hear what he just said? The type of guy. I'm gonna go back a little piece and play it one more time. Listen to the type of guy that they got. That explains why he rode up in a silver hearse. It's a joke to him. Listen to it.
Internal FBI reports and undercover recordings hired a convicted felon with a history of sexual assault and menacing with a weapon to infiltrate these groups while being paid thousands of dollars. And the shades of COINTELPRO that are part of this rise from the fact that Mickey Windecker, the informant, ended up becoming a leader in the protest movement, just as we saw informants in the 1960s and 1970s during COINTELPRO become leaders in those movements, and then accuse other leaders, or the real leaders of these groups, of being informants, a practice called snitch jacketing that was used to devastating effect against black political groups in the 1960s. And that's exactly what happened in Denver. Mickey became a leader of the racial justice movement there, accused real leaders of being informants when they were not, and then once he was in a position of leadership, attempted to entrap local activists in crimes, in some cases violent crimes. In fact, Mickey and the FBI went so far as to try to stitch together a supposed plot to assassinate Colorado's Attorney General, Phil Weiser, which ultimately went nowhere, but shows you the scale that the FBI had in trying to manufacture a plot that activists could get behind.
People would ask, they said, well, LB, why would the FBI need to do that? Don't forget, this was behind the George Floyd killing. That's why. The only answer I need to give you. And we all know that when it comes to law enforcement, and if we come together, do what we need to do it peacefully, do it the right way, it's going to crumble down. And what they try to do is to break that movement up, and caused a lot of chaos and havoc to where the movement couldn't go smoothly and correctly, to where the people responsible for George Floyd killing wouldn't come to justice. That's what they tried to do. And that's what they generally always try to do. They couldn't do that on January the 6th. They couldn't infiltrate that. They knew what was going on. And it was in their hometown, D.C. As far as headquarters, yeah. But they chose to do nothing about that. But something so peaceful as this, they want to come in and make it corrupt. I digress.
That would then reveal these activists as being violent. And I think it's important to understand the context in which this happened. In 2020, the Trump administration at the time was really beating the drum on this idea that Antifa and Black Lives Matter activists were potentially violent. This was a narrative that was being reinforced and echoed by right-wing media at the time. And what you're seeing in these undercover recordings is the FBI essentially trying to make that possible and happen.
And if you remember, they kept screaming Antifa, 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 Antifa this, Antifa that. Antifa had nothing to do in reference to corruption and doing anything of wrongdoing. Then or now, Antifa hasn't gone anywhere. But they're not talking about Antifa now. Why? Because there's no protest going on right now for Antifa to be so corrupt.
Ultimately, that does not happen. Obviously, there was no assassination plot or attempt against Phil Weiser, the Colorado Attorney General. But the FBI, using this paid informant, went to extreme lengths to try to make that happen.
Well, Trevor, as you mentioned, this was a tactic used often during COINTELPRO in the 60s and the 70s, but it's become standard practice for the FBI and law enforcement. I think back to during the Seattle World Trade Organization protests, there were undercover agents then trying to spur extreme action among the protesters. During the period after the 9/11 attacks, there were undercover FBI agents who tried to infiltrate Muslim groups around the country, trying to get them to participate in violent acts. So this has been a regular feature of the FBI. Have you been able to see whether they were doing this to the same extent among the right-wing groups that were actually involved in major terrorist attacks across the country?
Y'all wait on this answer right here. You already know.
Absolutely. So this is a tactic that became commonplace in the post-9/11 era, which was that the FBI used undercover agents or informants to, in the case of counterterrorism investigations, go into Muslim communities, find someone who might be interested in violence, and make everything possible, providing the means, the opportunity, and in most cases, the bomb or the weapon that ultimately would be used, then arrest that person and announce to the public a terrorism plot foiled. And so what's significant here is that we're seeing a lot of the powers and tactics used against would-be terrorists or supposed terrorists in the post-9/11 era being applied against political activists in Denver in the summer of 2020. And the reason that is significant is that the internal FBI records show in the case in Denver that the FBI launched its investigation based on nothing more than First Amendment protected activities, which were essentially things that Zebediah Hall and other activists had said, which in some cases were quite incendiary, but ultimately were First Amendment protected activities. And yet they launched this investigation based solely on that without any reason to believe that any of these activists were moving toward a plot of violence or anything of the like. And as for the question of whether this happens on the right, it does. You know, obviously there have been other plots that have targeted right-wing activists. The most well-known right now is the plot that targeted a group of men in Michigan in a supposed plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And so I think what's important about this story now is that we are entering this phase when Jim Jordan and the Congress are about to launch this committee that is specifically looking to establish this narrative that the FBI is solely focused on this type of tactic against right-wing groups and right-wing political activists, when that isn't true. What ultimately is true is that the FBI has an enormous amount of power that deserves a lot more oversight than it currently receives, and all sorts of groups from left to right are subjected to this kind of activity by the FBI. And so this narrative that the right wing is attempting to establish, that the FBI is prejudiced against right-wing groups and we're only seeing this activity among right-wing groups, there is evidence of that, and no doubt Jim Jordan will find it. But the truth is that this is far more extensive. It involves many groups. And in most cases, I would argue, if you look at the history of prosecutions in the post-9/11 era, these types of tactics are used far more against left-wing activists and left-wing political groups than they are against right-wing groups.
Even though the intelligence committees have found that it is domestic terrorism, far right-wing, that is the greatest threat to the United States right now. And you're talking about the Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, chaired by Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio. That's meeting on Thursday. But let's turn to a video capturing when FBI informant Mickey Windecker met with his FBI handlers. By the way, he's denying he's an FBI informant. Met with his FBI handlers before he met with the Denver activist Zeb Hall.
It is August 28th, 2020 at approximately 4:02 p.m. Special Agent Scott Dahlstrom with Special Agent Byron Mitchell, CHS, for meet with Zebediah Hall.
Thank you. You can hear this, so I'll put it in my front pocket, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. See how nice and slender they are? Video look good?
Yep.
Yeah, look handsome.
Mm-hmm.
Not as handsome as that kid.
I'm stopping it right there. I'm going to go back. This guy right here. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, tell me if that guy looks like this guy. Same guy to me. I'm just asking.
Yeah, look handsome.
Mm-hmm.
Not as handsome as that kid.
Yeah. I'm just asking, ladies and gentlemen, because, you know, he's stating that he wasn't an informant, but there you go. Information. You just gave yourself away, dog. And then you do this silly mess right here with pictures everywhere of you with, really? Okay. Thank you, Amy, for the wonderful interview you did there with Trevor. And there was more to it, but as you know, this right here gives you the logistics as to what went down. The question, really, it shouldn't be the question, but people would be concerned as to why did the FBI feel they need to get a felon, and I wouldn't just say a felon, just a corrupt-minded person to come in and bring corruption to a movement of people trying to get answers. Why would you do that? What type of people does things like that? That's the question. Some of us can answer it. Notice I say us. That includes myself. Some of us can answer that question easily. We know the answer to that question easily, but there's far too many of us of this world who do not know, or somehow or another can't muster up the gall to say what it truly is. Think about it. What group or type of people would bring corruption and negativity to a group of people who are trying to do something for the better of the good? With that, ladies and gentlemen, until next time.
Next. Ask yourself why. These are the black stories we've been shown. a narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. Of Black life. Let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.